So today I'm going to be taking a look at the brand Awake, and specifically their Sunmai series, which is kind of their more artistic, very fancy, very interesting dial series. And I think they are putting out some of the more interesting dials that exist, I mean, arguably in watchmaking in general, but especially at this price point of watchmaking. So as a note, the brand sent me the watch to review. It was about, I think, 2 weeks that I had the watch. And yeah, kind of quick side note, unfortunately, by the time I am reviewing this watch, this specific model is sold out. Unfortunately, there is no green dial in current production on their website, but I think it's still good to review the watch in the sense of it showcases what the brand is capable of, showcases the watch, and also kind of introduces this dial technique, which they do continue to use throughout their range, and they do currently have a standard production quote-unquote series on their website with a few pretty unique colors, just not green at the moment. So we have a diameter of about 39 millimeters, lug to lug of about 45, height of 11.9, so basically 12, lug width of 20 millimeters. Beating away in here, we're gonna have the Le Jouperet G101 movement. So very nice kind of ETA 2824 alternative. Here customized in a few ways for Awake in terms of the rotor, in terms of this outer ring holder, or movement holder rather, and it also does have a 68-hour power reserve, which is nice to see. The watch is made out of 316L steel, but apparently it is done in a recycled steel. Not sure where they get that, and this is the first time I've come across a watch using recycled 316L, but probably functionally pretty much the same. 50 meters of stated water resistance with just a regular push-pull crown here. We of course have sapphire crystal on the front, sapphire crystal on the back. To note, the watch does use BGW9 for the hands and indices, but you can kind of tell it's in this own customized way where it's on like a base of Lume with the marker built on top, which is pretty interesting. And really last but not least, at least in the US, this watch retails for about $29.90, give or take $3,000. I'm 99% sure that's inclusive of current tariffs, so if you live outside the US, it'll probably be a slight bit cheaper for you. So starting off with the dial here, and this is really the star of the show, it is the quote-unquote Sunmai series from Awake. This is a Vietnamese traditional lacquerware art form where basically they are using a traditional sap, they're painting it onto the dial, and where Awake is coming in is adding this silver leaf that's adding this cool texture element. They're using supposedly only natural pigments to achieve the coloration here as well. So this beautiful vibrant green that you get is basically just some kind of natural pigment they found, which is, I think, a pretty cool thing. The interesting part about this dial, and what I think makes this watch so interesting, is this is probably as handmade of a dial that you'll find for the price point, and arguably the best looking dial of that quote-unquote handmade variety, because this goes up to something like, let's say, the Anordain Fume series, but in my opinion, this is aesthetically a little bit more interesting. The texture here is a little bit more subtle, it's a little less in your face, and I do think the color tone is just beautiful. A very alive dial that has this color shift from a very deep, dark, almost green-black to a very bright, vibrant, almost glowing type of effect. It is one of those very few dials that has a genuine color shift inside of it, a genuine saturation shift, and I think it's one of those that will really keep your eye drawn, interested, and keep it fun overall. All of these markers are bifaceted, so as you can see, you get a beautiful light play. It's never a boring dial surface to be looking at. The dial is also very legible because of that, because at no point are all of the markers black. It's very legible. The markers themselves almost have a quote-unquote glowing effect. So it's nice to see that, of course, a lot of the money went into the dial, but they didn't leave everything else as simple, boring, plain, and quote-unquote not up to the same standard. What I love too is the handset itself is just a perfect extension of the marker design. It is not anything that contrasts or tries to stand out any more than the markers. It quite literally is basically an elongated marker. So there's a lot of beautiful dial harmony here. The handset has that same bifaceted design. It has that same luster about it, and aesthetically it looks fantastic, and at least in my opinion. The text is kept pretty much as minimal as possible. You have Awake there at the 12 o'clock, and really all you have is 6 o'clock here of saying handmade. And it's not even something you really notice immediately when you're staring at the dial either. One thing I will just note is the Awake text. I do think there was maybe a better way to do that. and I'm honestly not perfectly sure what that is. I don't know if it should have been a more brushed application of the metal, or maybe it should have just been a very nice, beautiful, thick printing. But there are times where basically the text of the brand name kind of just looks like metal. And I know that's a weird thing to say, but it almost loses definition, and it's hard to even read what the brand name is. It's hard to read what that metal is saying there at 12 o'clock. At other times and in low lighting like we are in now, it's beautiful. It's very controlled studio lighting. But in day-to-day living, there are just points where it gets kind of overblown and in my opinion doesn't look as good as it should. So zooming in here, and you can see that leafing, the silver foil is just much more defined, very beautiful. It has this kind of perceived depth about it as well, which is awesome. And because it's kind of almost deposited at different layers, or the leafing itself is not just a flat material, you have this little color play between different areas, different points, different heights on the leafing. So some parts are darker while some parts are greener, and that does shift and that does change throughout however much light is being shown on the dial. Taking a second, focusing on the logo here. Again, nicely done. We have the Awake logo. It is well polished. I don't really see any blemishes as well. It's just, again, at sometimes it seems like it all kind of blends away and becomes a little bit less readable. So I do think there's a kind of middle ground they can find to improve that bit. Looking at the markers themselves, also beautifully done. There are going to be a little bit of QC issues on this model in particular because this is a review model of the series. So we do see specs on the markers that I would hope won't be there in a standard production version. With that being said, again, beautiful marker design. We can see that it's bifaceted, each side sloping and meeting at that central point in the middle. And then you have an actual third facet there on the very end of the point going down to meet the dial. So you not only have a beautiful amount of faceting to the marker itself, but you have depth built into the actual metal itself there. So it just is a beautiful, beautiful marker that gives you all this light play, and really is a shape we don't see enough in watchmaking because it's simple, it doesn't have too many facets, but the way it catches light is really special. And you can see for some of the markers, the 12, the 3, the 6, and 9, they're a little bit larger, and the rest of them are this little smaller, little stubby guy, still beautifully polished, and even maybe even more so just because you have a smaller surface area capturing the light more immediately. And as you can tell, every single metal marker is built on a surface of lume that matches the shape. This lume gives a backlit effect to the markers that really is fun and is a different way to help you read the watch. It does make it incredibly legible. Of course, it is not the longest lasting application, but it is awesome while it is glowing. And the fact that they were actually able to build that same backlit lume architecture into the handset is beautiful. I mean, not only does it add a little bit of contrast, which helps the hand stand out from the dial, but I think it just looks cool and it is different and is showing a brand that at this price point is innovating when they don't even really have to. You can see here the hands are actually finished pretty well. There aren't many imperfections, maybe a little speck there, here and there on the minutes hand. But other than that, it's pretty fantastic. And realistically, in case you didn't notice, the seconds hand just started moving because I was so focused on the dial and capturing the dial that the watch has not been running up until this point. So although not great in terms of trying to help it tell time, it just kind of shows that the dial is so captivating that sometimes you get lost. We do have a beautiful center pinion cap, a feature you don't always see, and it is done beautifully well. The seconds hand itself also polished well. The hour hand, like I said, done well, just kind of like the minutes is. And what I think is really a beautiful thing that Awake did here is they included that little tiny third facet pointing down on the handset itself too. They didn't cheapen out, they didn't make the handset any less complex than the markers because it's probably made in a very similar manner anyway, and it's beautiful to see that. They really went all out. There's a lot of cohesion here that you don't see a lot with brands, especially these quote-unquote more independent boutique-y micro brands, and I gotta commend them on that. It's really done nicely and finished to a pretty good standard even for being a press piece. So moving on to the case, and this is definitely the more simplistic part about this watch, but still very nicely done. We have primarily, or really only, high polished, at least from the very front of the watch, or from the top view. You go to the sides and we now see a vertical brushing and this kind of interesting lug architecture, which you almost don't even notice from the top, but you can see here it gently bows out from this main circular mid case. So very interesting lug styling. It's just something they didn't have to do. It's definitely more expensive in terms of case production. And it's nice to see that they did a little bit of experimentation here. Even though you do have full high polish on the top of the watch, and maybe it's easier if I zoom in a little bit, but you can tell there's even still chamfers. You know, it's a polished surface, but you still have this beautiful chamfer. It nicely frames, especially when you're looking at the side of the case. You even have a gentle chamfer along the bottom edge as well, which is a detail not a lot of companies do. So it's nice to see Awake going the extra mile. Beautiful bezel here. It has this kind of gentle facet along its edge there, which is not always noticeable. The bezel construction is ever so slightly angled, so it meets up to the crystal. Obviously not perfectly, the crystal is still raised, but it is a beautifully constructed case. It's not really too thick at all anyway. And realistically, I think what the case is doing is more often than not letting the dial shine and just being a not afterthought, but a good complement that's a little bit more simplistic. Looking at the crown here, this is actually a new kind of Awake logo, representative of, you know, 4 sides for the 4 elements, because this watch is somewhat inspired by, not really the elements, but kind of the earth in general. Like this is the forest of the earth, the greenery, the vitality of green things. Winding, while I wouldn't define it as gritty, it has a pretty definitive gear, a little bit of a whine, a little bit of a crunch underneath your finger. It's not cheap feeling by any means. It doesn't feel screechy. It doesn't feel very grainy, but it's a very definitive feedback that isn't as smooth or as soft and buttery as it could be from some higher end watches. Is that a bad thing? No, because I think it's very in line for the price point. In terms of the actuation of the crown, pretty easy to pull it out. Setting it, this is where you actually do get a buttery smooth operation. It doesn't really feel weird. You're not feeling each individual tooth as you're moving around the handset itself. So this is a pretty nice operation. And pushing it back in, pretty nice feel. So nice size crown, I think. Proportionally it looks good, and overall really not much to complain about with the case shape. They kept it pretty simple. They kept it pretty thin, which is always great to see. And yeah, let's move on quickly to the case back. We can see, of course, this beautiful movement here. Of course, it's not like the most hot horology or anything like that, but you do get a nice little customized rotor. This rotor is pretty reactive, honestly. So this has that almost quote-unquote classic Miyota thing where you can get, if I can get it to go, a little bit of helicoptering that happens. So if you move your wrist at the right angle, you will get a very loud sound from the rotor. It's just one of those things that happens. I believe this is an indication of a one direction winding system. It is what it is. I haven't ever really noticed it on wrist during my actual day-to-day wear, so I'm not really gonna say that's a con in any way. And I do think the little clou de Paris movement holder done in metal is a really nice touch. Again, the movement itself is maybe not the most hot horology finished type of thing, but these are kind of little steps that they did not have to do. It just adds a little bit to the quote-unquote fanciness of this watch, and I think it does look nice when you flip it over. So moving on to how this watch wears. Earlier I was wearing my Grand Seiko here, and maybe let me zoom out because I think we're a little close to everything. There we go. So I'm wearing my Grand Seiko here. This one is what I really brought out because, again, Grand Seiko does an amazing job at making dials that pop and markers that shine. And as you can see, I have it here next to the Awake, and the Awake is not really blown away in terms of overall fit and finish. The Awake is for sure holding its ground in how much it plays with the light and how much it grabs your attention. And arguably, it's a dial that captures your attention more quickly because it's more vibrant, it's more colorful, it's more saturated. to be fair, this is one of the Grand Seiko's more subdued dials. But we're talking about the Awake here being half the price of this watch and looking in, at least in my opinion, just as good. Here we have the watch sitting on my 6.5-inch wrist, and as you can tell, it fits beautifully. I mean, I still have a lot of room here on the bottom edge. It doesn't overhang by any means. I mean, it sits really well within the bounds of my wrist. Even if I move it up just a tad, I mean, I have closer to a 6-inch wrist here, maybe, yeah, I think it's 6-inch. And I mean, it still is plenty of room. So you can wear this on a pretty small wrist and it still look awesome. Again, one thing I think you just immediately notice when you're wearing this watch is it pops. It's such a vibrant, saturated, deep, intense color that it really doesn't look like any other watch, which I think is an awesome thing they did here. Looking at it from a more down the barrel view, obviously if I try to flex my wrist and go crazy like no one wears their watch, it could look tall. But if I have a more relaxed, actual true wearing position, it does conform pretty well. It's not a watch that really wears up too high. It's not even thick naturally anyway. So it is a really well wearing watch, comfortable. It isn't sharp in any way. Even the crown doesn't really dig into my wrist at all. You can see it just has a pretty nice profile, pretty comfortable. The strap itself, also really good inclusion. It fits well, it's comfortable. The rubber backing is actually pretty nice as well. So this is, I think, a pretty fantastic package all in, which is rare to see. Moving on to some other straps. Here we have this beautiful FKM rubber, just kind of a generic strap, but obviously green's the watch out. And I think even though it is more monochromatic, the green still pops enough on the dial where it doesn't look too samey and too one color. Looks pretty good. Again, I think the green is just, they went with a tone that's actually pretty easy to match. So it's not a green that's too weird or too wild, and looks good to me. Now, if you do want to get weird and wild, this strap I think does complement the watch, but it's a lot. This I believe is toad skin. I forget off the top of my head, but I'll have it linked down in the description. This I got off of eBay. Color tone wise, I think it matches the watch pretty well, and you know, why not? There we go. The watch definitely pops. Obviously picks up on the green tones, picks up on some of the lighter tones, even picks up on that BGW9 Lume signature. So looks pretty good. Now, if you do want a slightly more serious look, you can always go for this, or really any strap in this more brown neutral tone. Looks fantastic with the green, pairs well. This one specifically is by Vario. Really good quality strap, and I think it looks good on the watch. Comfy, really warms the watch up, gives it a tone that obviously does not appear naturally on the dial, but is just a really good color match overall. Of course, classic white silicone strap obviously makes everything pop. The watch is already this saturated bright green. The strap brings that out and complements it, and really no complaints. Really looks great. I think you also notice the little bit of lume plots a little bit more once you have this strap on. It just kind of pulls those white tones out. Obviously comfy, and yeah, I think it's a combo you should try. So taking a look at the lume here, and as you can see, you do get that kind of backlit effect, which ends up leading to a very readable dial. You can beautifully see the hands. You can actually every now and then see the seconds hand running because of how well the dial is illuminated by this effect. It is not the brightest, it is not going to last the longest because it's not a huge amount of application, but while it does last, it's very readable, it's consistent. The tone between the markers and the lume are pretty much the exact same, which is a little bit rarer to see, and it does just look nice and look unique overall. Reluminating comparing to the Timex Indiglo, as you can see, the kind of first initial glow is pretty similar in terms of brightness and legibility. So it is one of those things where the initial application of the Awake is pretty good, but like I said, it's not something that's going to be lasting all night, but it is still very legible when you get it kind of direct sunlight on it and you go inside and whatnot. So pros and cons of this watch, and I think the biggest pro is going to be the dial. The dial itself pretty much glows. It feels like a gem. It has this depth, this saturation to it, which you don't get with most watch dials. Nonetheless, just dials at this price point. It really does catch your eye. It pops. It feels premium. It feels just beautiful, you know, for lack of any better word, because when you look at it, you just think that is very good looking. Another big pro I think for the watch is the quality you're getting at the price I think is fair. This is about retail $3,000 US, and although that is not a cheap watch by any means, you're getting a dial that is really, for all intents and purposes, handmade. It is something that is hand lacquered. It has silver leafing that's hand applied. You have hand sanding going onto the dial. You're getting a lot of traditional craftsmanship in this dial that you really don't see from any other brand or any other watch really at this price point. The closest you get is Anordane, which has their enamel dials, and they also do have a beautiful depth and a beautiful saturation to them. In my opinion, the aesthetic of Awake is a little bit more quote unquote like mass market. It will appeal to more people, whereas Anordane's a little bit more niche. The aesthetic may not be for everyone. But outside the dial, the case finishing is done very well. It is a nice case. It is comfortable. It's relatively thin. But again, you have things where you have chamfers that really don't need to be there necessarily, but it makes it a higher end product because they are. Another big pro for the watch, I think, is the Lume is super unique. I mean, I've never really seen an application of Lume like this. The closest I've seen is maybe Mondane did like a backlit glow for the hands where they just applied this superluminova on the back side of the hands. So you had a similar kind of effect, but this one is way more unique in the sense of like you have a 3D Lume structure with a marker on top of it. I've not seen that before. I think it's a beautiful happy medium between having a full 3D Lume marker and having a full metal marker that has no lume to it, because without metal, your watch really doesn't shine. It doesn't capture the light as nicely. And to me, it doesn't look as premium. Full lume tends to look good on sportier watches, where this is definitely leaning dress. They found, I would argue, a very ingenious way of including lume and not making it look tacky. Including lume, but making it not detract in any way from the shine, the shimmer, and the construction of those metal markers, because you have a beautiful multifaceted shape here, which typically you can't have because it'll be interrupted by some kind of lume channel. So, I mean, kudos to them. This is a really good application and execution of lume. And last but not least, and I think this is maybe not a point that gets brought up enough, or to be fair, I can't bring up with most watches, is that the original strap is very good. It uses the lug strap, so I mean, you know, it is a company most people are familiar with, and maybe Deluxe doesn't always make the best quality of things, or maybe they can have QC slippage here and there, but the nice thing is the Awake strap, it's using this nubuck on the front, it's using rubber on the back, so it's incredibly comfortable. It's versatile because you don't have to worry about sweating through it. It is comfortable. There's really no negative I can say about the strap, and thankfully color-wise as well, it pairs very nicely with the watch. It's not something where you have to get the watch and immediately go buy another strap. This can service you very, very adequately for a long time. Maybe this is nitpicky, but a con for me is the limited nature, especially of this watch series, the Frosted series. If you love this green dial, you fall in love with it, unfortunately you can't have it. They only made, I think, 50 of them. So it's a give and take. Of course, having limited runs give some people a collector community to have frenzy over, but it sucks because, again, if you love that thing, they might not make it again, or they might not make it in that exact variation anymore. So, you know, it is what it is. At least it gives you a prep for if you like this dial, this execution, this series. Now you know if they come out with a color you love and it is limited, maybe jump on it. But that is the tough part. It's not something you can come back to 2 years from now and still get it. And on that note, from this Silver Leaf series, or Frosted Leaf rather, they only have the brown version left. There was a green, a blue, and a brown. Only the brown is currently available. I think it's pretty unique, and if you like shades of brown, it'll be a very nice colored watch, but you're kind of out of luck. The blue does have a kind of standard production counterpart, but it is a different process, and yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. Moving on to real cons. I don't love the Awake logo. The logo itself is fine. Awake, it's neither here nor there. It's just a name, you know, and it's more of the fact that I don't like the finishing of the logo because it is fully high polish. It's so rounded and it's so small, it blends away very easily and kind of gets obstructed within the dial itself. It becomes kind of just like a blurb of light. It's not very easy to notice the dial. If they did some kind of printing, honestly, I think it would even look better. But arguably, they need to have a matte logo or a brushed logo, and I think it would be more visible. Because there are just situations where I can't read the logo, and to me it cheapens the entire look of the watch, because I'm looking at the watch, I don't see the name, I can't read the name, it is impossible to read the name. So it's really only one of the first times I've seen that with a watch, and it was a very odd experience. Another small con, I don't love the unidirectional rotor on this. Again, I kind of showed earlier, you can get that kind of helicoptering effect where you get a very definitive, fast spin and spin and spin of the rotor. Does it happen a lot? No. Was it overly loud when it was helicoptering? Also no, which was nice. It's a nice movement, so it doesn't sound cheap and rattly in a sense. But I would like to see bidirectional winding. Manual wind would also be lovely for this watch, but that might just be my personal preference. And that's really all I have. Overall, this is a fantastic watch. I don't have many qualms with it. I do think Awake is making currently some of the best dials out there. I kind of think just in watches in general. I mean, of course, are we talking about some $2 million masterpiece that has a crazy dial? No. But I think this dial has looked better to me than watches I've seen for tens of thousands of dollars, and that's saying something. I think arguably a dial makes the watch for most people. Again, it's the thing you interact with the most. And when you have something here that is so like visceral, it affects you so much, it really pops, it really grabs your attention. It doesn't look cheap or look tacky. It genuinely looks like someone put time and effort into it, because someone did put time and effort into it. Someone was quite literally hand finishing this dial. And that is not something you usually get for around $2,000 to $3,000. Is this a cheap watch? No. Is it a perfect watch? No, but I do think for the price, it is a very interesting watch, and I think can really stand out in your collection. When I had it next to my Grand Seiko, it didn't really look any cheaper, and it's half the price. So it's one of those things where I think you'll be very happy with this watch if you are already kind of predisposed to liking it. If you've seen this video, for example, and you're okay with my tiny little nitpicks, you're going to like the watch because it is a good watch. I'm very excited to see what Awake does. Again, these are some of the best dials I've seen personally among the hundreds of watches I've seen and have had hands-on with. You know, take my opinion with a grain of salt. My taste maybe doesn't align with yours, but I do think these are some of the best dials out there, and they deserve your attention. But anyway, those are just my thoughts, my opinions, my ramblings. Thank you as always for watching. Hope you got something out of it, and I will see you in another one.